Manchester Community Schools special meeting to order. Could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Present. Please note Mr. Frank's attorney is not here tonight. Board, do you have any emergency additions or deletions to the agenda?
What's listed under emergency additions and deletions, you can see those points. Those are all incorporated into the agenda. So just so you know, those were listed out. Those are all included. So we don't have any other additions.
This time I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Mr. Brubaker?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
I'll make a motion to second that.
Mr. Raymer, second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Recommendations for approval. We have certified and classified staff. It was in your packet. Elizabeth Hall, Rhonda Spann, Tyson Silvius, Molly Mash, Caitlin Andrich, Sarah Steele, Sherry Conley, Katie Williams, Dawn Walker, Karen Jimenez, and Rebecca Pyle. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Booker?
I'll second.
Mr. Hensley? Any discussion? Okay. Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Hensley?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We have two resignations. Motion carried. We have two resignations in certified and classified staff. Josh Troyer at MES, first grade teacher, girls varsity basketball coach, and junior high co-ed golf coach. And Lucas Helton, Manchester Senior High School special education paraprofessional. We'd entertain a motion to accept those resignations.
So moved.
Mr. Esposito,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Raymer. Any discussion?
I just want to thank Josh for his service.
I would concur with that. Any other discussion, comments?
I want to thank for Lucas, anybody that served the school community.
Okay, call the vote. Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Hensley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion carries unanimous. Retirement. Mr. Baldwin, if you would. Dawn Hess, retiring after 31 years.
Good evening. Yesterday, we received a letter here in the office, and I also spoke with Mrs. Hess, who is retiring from her position as a special education paraprofessional at Manchester Intermediate School after 31 years of service to the school community. You know, it's hard for me to fathom 31 years of doing anything
Mr. Baldwin. I'm sure she appreciates the fact that you pointed out that she started teaching when you were in 2.
I tell everybody all the time, this is the oldest I've ever been, so I mean, that's all I got to go on. Thank you.
Okay, MCS Reentry Plan.
Board, you have in your packet, an updated copy of the reopening plan proposal. I heard you at the last meeting, there was some concern about, the wording for the face covering requirements. So that has been updated. You'll find that under face coverings and then specifically under transportation as a part of the reopening plan. Just so that you are all aware, what we've done is all schools within the buildings and on school grounds and in the classrooms, at this point face coverings are optional when students are able to socially distance within the 3 feet or greater than the 3 feet. That's going to be the recommendation at this point. I do know, and thank you Mr. Booker, that some guidance came out from CDC today about face masks being required in schools. We're looking into that and waiting for direction from the Indiana Department of Education on that issue. So the word of the day with this plan is fluid, okay? So I mean, it could change based on recommendations that might come down from the Department of Health, Wabash County Health Department, or from the Center for Disease Control. I had checked into other school corporations in our local area, and I tell you, it's mixed out there. Some districts are requiring the mask on buses, some are not. Some are taking the governor's order, the executive order, as precedence over a federal mandate of wearing masks on transportation, and some are not. What you have tonight, board, is that we would require students and staff on all of our buses, regular school transportation, all field trip buses, special needs buses, whatever that bus would be for athletics, that we would require the use of a mask. We're not gonna have a bus aide on that bus saying, get your mask on every time that it comes down. We're not gonna do that. I think students can be responsible in handling that on our buses. But I mean, the recommendation that you have before you tonight is to approve the plan as presented, and that includes that on all school transportation, those masks or face coverings would be required. So we'd ask that you approve that.
I entertain a motion to approve the MCS reentry plan. Mr. Brubaker?
Dave, I've got a question.
After we need to put the motion on.
Okay.
You making a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Second, okay. Discussion? Mr. Brubaker?
Yeah, I've had some members of the community approach me. What happens if we do not comply with the CDC's guidelines? I'm asking a question.
That's yet to be determined. To my knowledge, there isn't any case law that would set any precedence with that. The expectation is, and I asked specifically at the Department of Education, Mike LaRocco, who is the Director of School Transportation, he said it's a mandate, so therefore you should do it. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question.
I do know,
Booker?
yeah, I'm sorry, yes. I do know that last year, MA and the staff worked with the county health department a lot on that, whether it was required or not, or how to move forward with that. So my guess is it depends on the county level. That's my guess. So I want to throw that out there. And I don't know if MA or anybody else in the audience can answer that a little bit better, but I know last year we were based upon the county health level, or the code red, orange, and yellow.
I had a conversation with Dr. Rowe, I believe it is, and he said that's really your decision. Whatever your board approves is what he'll go with. So.
And that would be my comment. I wanna know specifically what's legally required, and then what's our decision, and then what's recommended. So, if that was gonna be a question for Mark tonight, if he was in attendance, is where are we exactly legally on this? So,
Thanks, Mr. Hensley.
And
Any
then,
other
then
comment?
it's a board vote, basically, so.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, my only comment would be, I would be concerned if we're not following, a guidance by one of these agencies. What does that do to our insurance should something happen? That's always my concern, I guess.
Mr. Esposito, did you have a comment? Any further discussion, question?
Yes.
Mr. Raymer?
I guess one of my concerns is if, and it appears based upon conversations from earlier today, surrounding communities' systems are much more lenient, and I think this needs to be discussed. And our community believes that ours is too stringent. What's the repercussions if we lose more students? And I think that we need to think about that. I don't have a solution to this. I want that to be noted and thought about before we make a decision.
Just looking in Wabash County Board, just so that you know, of the 3 school districts, MSD is not requiring a mask on their buses. City of Wabash is requiring it. And then you're making the decision tonight.
Here's what I would say to the board. This is part of the ESSER 3 grant. This reentry plan is required. Our next meeting is not until August 17th, which is after school. So this is a fluid document. It can be modified if we gather more information. So I guess I would suggest that we go ahead and approve this with the caveat that we do have the option and the knowledge that we can go back and change it so that we are in compliance. Since Mr. France isn't here, I don't know what the repercussions are in CARES 3.0 by not having this approved at the start of school. Mr. Brubaker?
What, when they require that we wear them on the bus, how is that different from inside our schools? How does the federal government tie into the busing? The CDC tie into busing as opposed to not busing?
The Department of Education is including school buses as a part of the transportation. Just like on any public transportation system, buses are required, so therefore the school buses are part of that transportation. That's what pulls in the transportation piece.
So, yeah, so,
Mr. Henson?
whatever you want. So, legal requirement, if MSD is not mandating it, then it's not a legal requirement.
I can't address what
I
they're
mean,
doing.
so that's got repercussions because, Roger, you're right, if we don't follow the law, then the insurance doesn't cover us, it's our liability. That's the biggest point here, and we've already seen that on issues. So what my question is, if it's not legal, is there a middle ground here that we can go? Because it is a political issue and it will impact enrollment, I'm sure, that's this is the next little hot issue that we're gonna say. So if we're making mask optional within the school, why can't we make mask optional on the buses? I'm just applying a little common sense to this whole situation.
Thank you.
And it kind of really goes back to the federal government saying that transportation includes school buses. That's part of transportation, so therefore it's required. So, there's always an option, and, parents can certainly bring their own child. They wouldn't have to send them on the bus. That could be an option. I don't know if that applies for everyone or not, but.
We've got a lot of single parents out there that probably don't know what that option.
Yeah, and that makes it tough. I get that.
So I'm just stating my opinion on it, so I'm always looking for happy medium here between, little points of contention that we deal with, so.
Yeah.
So can we go ahead and pass this, and we will make sure that either Mr. Downs or Mr. France is here at the August 17th meeting who can answer all these legal questions. That way we stay in compliance with ESSER 3.0, the grant monies. This is supposed to be done before school starts. And it is a fluid document, we can change it. Any further comment? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker?
No.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Hensley?
No.
And I vote yes. We have 5-2. Okay, reentry plan's passed. And we will have a legal representative here on the August 17th meeting to answer any questions and possible modifications. Approval of overnight field trip.
You have 2 field trip requests in your packet, one for soccer, girls soccer, and then one for cross-country. So we're asking that those be approved.
I would entertain a motion to approve both as one. The documentation is in your packet.
I'll motion.
Mr. Hensley made the motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Brubaker second. Any discussion or questions? Okay, I'll start the vote this time. I vote yes. Mr. Hensley?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Okay, both trips are approved unanimously. Okay, we have a superintendent search consulting agreement to approve.
In your packet, I think this is an agreement that, in consultation with Dr. Croner, he's assisting you in the search for your superintendent. So we would ask that this contract be approved.
I entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll move.
Mr. Hensley,
I'll second.
Mr. Raymer, any discussion?
Just like to thank Dr. Croner for his assistance.
I would echo the same. Any other comment? Okay. All in favor, or I'm sorry, Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Hensley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Manchester Youth Football League.
You have a letter here from Brian Bruin, who is the Manchester Youth Football Commissioner, and the request basically is to use school property for the Manchester Youth Football League. Dr. Lippy and I had a conversation about that, and we're good to go with this.
Absolutely.
So we would encourage you to approve this agreement, this request.
I entertain a motion to approve it. Mr. Brubaker,
I'll second.
Mr. Booker, any further discussion or questions? Okay, Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Hensley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion carries unanimously. And at this time, we have Dana Wanamaker from Barton Cove, Vilma. He has a presentation on the strategic plan. Welcome, Dana.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Churchlinger. Mr. Self, can you bring up our PDF? Thank you. So, for those of you in the audience, a lot of this is new. For some of you board members, I assume some of this is new. For those of you who have been on the committee that we have been addressing with this, you will notice a few key changes from the last conversations we had. In particular, I would point out down near the bottom right center of the screen, and you're looking at a floor plan of the high school, just to orient yourselves. North is up on this image. The little red spots down there in the bottom right-hand corner, other bottom right-hand corner. That's now just starting to slide off the screen. The left side of that is the current main entrance to the school, and one of the issues that we were asked to address was begin to approach a more secure entrance than what you have.
Computer doesn't want to keep up. There you go.
There we go.
Sorry.
One of the ideas was to address a more secure entrance. So to do so, we have to capture that current entry hallway because we need to be able to prevent folks from coming into the building and turning and heading up the stairs or turning down either hallway to the left or the right. And the direction we had been given was to capture the front classroom, repurpose that, renovate that to some degree to bring forward 2 or 3 personnel to manage entrance into the school, to handle things being dropped off, to certify visitors, to pass on in, yet let the primary office stay where it is. So minimize expense, but still actually put bodies at the front door, a little better than what you have now. That's part one. That's no different than what we've shown to you before. Part two would be at the left end, Mr. Self, the addition we're looking at towards the west end of the building. For those of you who saw this before, it is no different in plan other than we flipped it from projecting to the south to now projecting to the north off that extended corridor. So the corridor comes off the west end, right where the doors come out, right by the shop classes there. We have a bit of a gap, so we leave room for things to happen in the future and also just for certain fire prevention issues and fire protective issues. And then a new dining hall, kitchen and serving area, restrooms for the cafeteria, mechanical space for that area. And when we say kitchen, receiving, serving, that includes a dock into the space, it includes storage areas, all your coolers, freezers, prep, serving. Same square footage, just a different orientation. That was requested at our last meeting also. So now, Mr. Self, if I can get you to move it one more time to the part that shows the existing food service area of the high school. Based on the comments we had last time, we downsized the footprint or the impacted footprint a little bit, trying to reduce our costs here. It's a little smaller, and when we get there, I'll describe it.
I don't know. This computer doesn't like this, sorry. Oh, oh.
We're close. That's good enough. We can work with that. The right half of that red space is the current cafeteria. The left half is the dish room and serving. So we talked about a collaboration space or a kind of a student commons that was open pretty much all the time, possibly available during after-school activities. We've pulled that sort of front and center, so it becomes the hub for the other things that work off of it. We talked about a dedicated presentation space that could open up into that collaboration area or be protected so that you can keep some of the more sensitive equipment secure if concerned, or be able to isolate the room for classes going on in that space when other things are happening in the building. So we pulled that back into what's the current serving area. Now, all the spaces and the sizes for these things are very fluid right now. We're just trying to get some definition here. And I want you to keep in mind the whole purpose of this exercise at this point in time is to define the scope of work enough to provide a responsible budget so that you can make decisions and move forward and actually begin to seriously design these spaces. So we're trying to get our arms wrapped around the problem right now. Collaboration space, dedicated presentation space. Spirit Shop wasn't part of our last conversation, but it's something that's come up from time to time in this conversation. I'm not sure the existing dish room is the proper place for it. It's not attached to what will become the teacher's classroom, but it does put it in a place that's very accessible for students and for after-school activities, during the day, after school. It's a good location for its use. It's a little more difficult to supervise and staff in the way that we have discussed previously. As you go further north, the north end of the existing cafeteria is a great size for the classroom that the teacher has requested for what she's teaching and what she's trying to do. We can put it adjacent to what will become the bean, which basically occupies where the 4 columns sit in the middle of the cafeteria, extends back to the west, and actually wrap back in and pick up a storage room in there. That way it gives the bean sort of a back of house and front of house as you would in any establishment of that sort. And it uses the existing pair of doors that face to the east as an entrance to all those activities from that corridor. So we've kind of consolidated all those. And at the last meeting, I believe I mentioned that probably only one of those existing columns had something structural in it. I lied. 3 of the 4 have structural elements in them. All except the one, I believe on the southwest corner, are structural, or have a structural column inside of them. This was an interesting point as the building got added onto over the years. Mr. Self, if you can now move to the next page.
Oh, sorry. The computer, oh, now it's gonna laugh at me.
What you'll see when it pops up is the floor plan that you just looked at superimposed on the site. So you can begin to see how that addition impacts the property.
All right, I'm gonna start over.
There we go. Thank you. And I don't know that we need to zoom in and out so much.
Okay.
Let's keep it easy. What you can see previously, that food service addition leaned forward. It potentially impacted the way that buses drop off, pick up, how you operate your facility right now. By flipping the addition to the north, it obviously impacts the bus pen, but it allows traffic to generally move about as it always has, with the exception of cutting off the path around the entire building. We come up just shy of the existing barn there with this addition, as it's laid out now. Again, proportions can change, configuration can change. And this size was based on a high school occupancy, a junior and senior high school occupancy of 900. That was what we kind of were working with the biggest potential number of students that you could envision for the foreseeable future. Randy, one more, please. So the only impact that this had on the budget we had presented previously, and this is broken down into 3 pieces for those of you who have not seen it. We dealt at the top here, from the black line at the top to the black line right there in the middle, with food service. And we have a range there that says total from 3.1 to 4.2 million. Those are what we call the hard costs. And as you're thinking about this and you begin to bundle these things into a project, keep in mind you're probably going to add about 25% to these numbers for what they call soft costs. All the financing, all the bond counsel, the fees for designers, and the furniture that goes in what you're building. So all those things get added into this. But when we're trying to budget, we deal with the construction costs. So the range represents what would be the smallest square footage you'd be likely to build, and that is based on current occupancy at 85% usage, which I know you have a higher incidence of students using food service now. You're up at, I think, around 90%, 95%. When we were running numbers, it's typical to run numbers at about 85%, so that's just where we started to put this range together. So from 85% of your current student population to 100% of potential growth to 900 students. That's what that range represents. Randy, if you can please pan down now. Okay, the secure entrance has not changed since what you saw previously. We're still looking in the neighborhood of about $250,000 for that. What did change was the bean and the media annex is what we've called that space. I believe last time we were around 1.6 for the square footage we were impacting. As we've begun to refine this, you'll notice that number has dropped to about half. So about 816.
815?
For where we are now, 815 is as good as my 816, so yes.
Possibly.
Questions about this part, because now I'll move on to, we were also asked to look at what would the impact be of should the intermediate school move to this campus and be handled through this same food service.
Any questions, board? Visitors, audience?
Yeah, I got a big question. Are you guys happy with this now?
They just saw it. Well,
I'm not gonna be in there most often, so.
so, yeah,
I mean,
we got some tweaking to do.
I think the feeling has been good, but these guys gotta dig into that. Make them speak a little bit. What do you think, guys? Becky, got a big part of this.
What, I was gonna say, what is there not for me to be happy about?
Yeah.
Really, I mean,
Okay.
compared to my existing space, what we could potentially do and have space for, I mean, I would be really happy for not to have our students, every student have a place to sit. And when lunchtime comes, let them be able to sit with their friends or, you know, not something like this.
Yeah, awesome.
Mr. Zinmeister, can I get you to step to the podium, please?
Yes, sir.
Well, you're the high school core committee rep. You know,
Yes.
you sat in all the meetings. I want to hear what you got to say. And let share your comments with the board. Good, bad, indifferent. Let them know.
It looks very similar to what we talked about at the previous meeting, which is what we talked about. The core committee, I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to say about it, but this is kind of what we talked about when we met with your committee. And we also met with Dana the last time. I know that the configuration has been moved around a little bit, probably from the last time, what we looked at or talked about in terms of what is currently the cafeteria, but I think, you know, that can work for what we've talked about doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shelley also commented, we talked a little bit, Shelley Lightford, and that we liked where the bean is.
Dr. Lippy, can I get you to go to the podium? We got people watching at home.
There you go.
so, when we talked, is this on now?
Yep.
When we talked first, the bean was stuck back in the kitchen.
So it's back in here. And I didn't really connect with that. I wondered if Shelley did. Shelley didn't. And Dana's pulled it out there a little bit. Now,
We'd like to kind of discuss, like, can we bring it down closer to the commons, maybe down on that wall where the entrance is, and maybe we can't, given structural, you know, problems with that, but we do like it better here than in the kitchen, right, Shelley? I mean, I kind of connected with that too, and that's why I went to talk with her, was to see, because I kind of like liking where that was at, so maybe you want to
ask why. It's just not buried. It was buried back in the kitchen. That's kind of stuffed way back in. We want the bean to be a highlight where people can see it. Kids come in there. And so you don't want it to have to go through a Byzantine maze to get back in there.
And we do have a lot of aides that use the bean. When guests come, they like to go get a coffee there. Not that we had a lot of guests last year, but before that we did. And then again, if we ever open up for ball games, home games, it would be nice. Obviously, we would want the gift shop separated because I do have to teach and watch what's occurring at the same time. But yeah, I'm really happy with everything.
I got a question, I don't know for Dana or for who, I guess, but was there any thought to having access to the bean from that collaboration area as well?
I think the key, as you look at this in plan, the bean looks like it's tucked back in. In my mind, that collaboration space on the corner, we might even want to consider, do you begin to take some of those walls out and open that space up so it becomes part of the hallway? Therefore, people flow through it. It just depends how these folks want to use it. If they want it to be somewhat contained and keep traffic from flowing through, just come in, then the bean does feel like it's a little back in the corner. If we open up a few more spaces and allow people to flow through the space a little more freely, now it is out where people can wander through, get a coffee or whatever they want to do, and it begins to feel like it's pulled forward even though it's not. It's a placeholder right now. It clearly needs more conversation and more work. This is the first time these folks have seen it, so.
Are you talking about opening it up in the pink area? It's the old cafeteria?
The area along this wall.
Right. Yeah, okay, that's what
The
I,
more that
that's,
opens up and feels part of the hallway,
right.
the more the beam in your mind begins to pull forward.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that it didn't get lost on one of the biggest things for Shelley, and I think she said, but I just want to make sure it's a point of emphasis, was the spirit shop and bean really need to be together. They have to be merged. It's too much supervision to be on one corner and the other. So whatever configuration we come up with, those really got to be merged. So.
Well, and this is this is pretty penny, right? It's the worst time to build it I can remember. I mean, and I'm like 55 years old as far as cost and stuff like that. So make sure you guys are all happy, as I'm saying. This is yours. And we're not in there. You guys are going to love your idea, like little business place, open center. We do need more people in here. We need to bring businesses in and show us, walk them through there. Kind of there's Wynn's FFA program. That Mr. Host, we got our classrooms. Did you get everything from a business center then that you wanted within this?
And I also want to just reiterate, Gwen's real happy that she's not stuck back in the old kitchen. She likes her space, so she's happy with this.
Well, at the end of the day, this is the best bang for taxpayers, You guys set that space up because we're not building a new space, we're just reorganizing a space that we already have, and we're addressing a major problem with that other product.
And we'll make sure Gwen gets the oven and the shed as well. She'll be happy.
Be careful, she might get in a swinging mood over there. Okay, so the classroom that we lost, for anybody that's watching online that might be concerned with, because we need classrooms, that classroom will be recouped in where Shelley's current room is. So, we'll take over this space, which is now Shelley's, because now Shelley will move it out there. So we will not lose classroom, we'll actually gain a classroom. So, that's an important note for everybody watching online. Thought we might be down a classroom, because that's a concern for teachers. We don't want them on carts.
Just to change gears just a little bit, Dana, did you make contact with Oscar?
I did. We had a conversation just yesterday,
Okay.
yesterday morning, and he told me by the time we were done, he had all the information he felt he needed to pull together information for you folks for whenever you're scheduled to meet and talk again.
Okay, just so the board knows, Dana and the bond council are working together to price this out, and they plan on coming to our August meeting and making a presentation and how we can fund this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, okay. Quick question, I know
Mr.
you
Booker?
answered a little bit of this, just clarification, I guess my question is, that space is designed to handle 900 students, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, and you mentioned if in the foreseeable future, this building gets used for more students, and we have maybe, how many are in the?
Approximately 300, we should be about 270.
Okay, so we got another 400 to seat. What do you,
That's the next part of your presentation,
Yeah,
is
that
it,
is
Dana?
correct, sir.
Yeah.
Before we leave this though, while we got Nate in here, Nate, do you see any glaring safety things, or is this kind of, are you the SROs kind of involved in getting a look at this too?
This is for us all, so.
Okay.
I do like the interest more secure.
Good.
Okay, any other questions before we move to the next section?
oh, that's.
Yeah, one quick one. Dana, 900 is in a rotation, or maybe I missed that. How many, what would be the capacity at one time?
We assume 3 lunch periods. So we size the kitchen based on number of meals total. We size the dining area based on total meals served, broken down over 3 periods. So if there's 900 students, that dining hall is sized approximately for 300 students at a time.
Anybody else? Mr. Cooker, you got something?
Yeah, refer to everyone out here for this real quick question. Do you feel that having lunches down to 2 periods a day versus 3 lunches would benefit everybody?
Becky?
Okay, off the top of my head here, it doesn't really matter to me, I just know that I need to somehow segregate those 7th and 8th graders. Whether they would come at a different time, I just have to have them by themselves to serve, not necessarily to eat, simply because of the meal pattern requirements, and I'm required to feed them, and versus,
Right.
the state comes in and watches us serve, and we're serving in 7th grade or what we are giving our high school students, they're not gonna be very happy.
Okay, so it would be more of a food requirement than a,
But that could be addressed maybe in how that's laid out. I mean, there could be some creative ways to do that. I'm not sure.
It's just longer lines. The lines will be really super long.
well, yeah, not every.
Is there a purpose behind your thought, Robert?
Well, I had heard from 1 or 2 teachers that there was a benefit to going down to 2 periods so you don't have kids 80 minutes or so and one 15 minutes, or just a mismatch of the day on that. But but if I'm talking ill of myself, then I'll stop.
Okay, Dana,
What your thought was.
let's move into the next section. Those are things that we can work through in the next 4 or 5 months.
Okay, Mr. Self, next slide, please. Oop, nope, not that one. Right there. Oop, too far, back up one, please. There we go. So, on this image, the secure entrance and the media annex, the existing food service area, they're the same as the last plan. The difference is the addition that we're putting on. You'll notice in the connecting cord or a break there, when we begin to place this on the site, I think this wants to be more in the middle between the two buildings for more reasons than just to split the difference. It fits better on the site by moving it over to the middle, at least right now. We reconfigured or reoriented the spaces a little bit with this one, as much as any reason to show you a different look at how it might function. So here, we have the high school portion of this and the junior senior high portion, intermediate school portion. So again, this would be serving the intermediate students over a 3-period process as well. That's what it's based on. The dashed line just represents some form of separation between the intermediate students and the junior senior high students. Whether that's a fixed wall, whether that's a movable wall, whether that's just furniture or a change in floor level, something to delineate two different spaces. Still one big space, however, the thought being at our last meeting was giving you more flexibility with that dining hall to take tables out or push tables up against the wall, bring more chairs in there, and have larger meetings or larger functions with people lined up more like tonight. So we're trying to maintain that ability for you and how this begins to lay out. We moved the kitchen to the north side. It's what you see basically in that northeast corner. We added a set of bathrooms, so there's bathrooms on the east end and the west end, basically for the intermediate school students and then for the junior senior high students. And behind the set of restrooms on the west end is basically the mechanical space. Now, whether the building lays out like this or not, that's an appropriate amount of square footage for each of those functions for the size building we're talking about. Randy, can you please move to the next slide? This will show you how it fits into the site. Now here it begins to get a little more fun. The reason we pulled it further west, notice it kind of tucks in between the ticket booth and the barn for the buses. First of all, to describe it tonight graphically, it was easier to see. It also, in my mind, for you folks sitting here, you know how far it is between those buildings, so it gives you an idea of size. That's why I placed it there. The corridor off the existing high school still comes out following the same line, so you begin to see how it gets placed. What gets a little more fun, by moving it to the center, we leave room for an addition onto the high school between it and this addition. There was talk about a lecture hall might want to go in there someday. I know there's also been talk about, in the future, more court space or more gym space, not necessarily a field house, but placing it there would allow another court or another couple of courts to be added onto the junior high side of this building, so that you potentially expand that out. It just sits nicely and allows you some flexibility going down the road. That's one of the nice things about that position. I'm sure we might have reasons to move it somewhere else, but that's why it's there for right now. Notice also, because the east end of this building is gym and locker rooms, we need to sort of get around those to connect. So what we showed was coming across the face of this building and connecting into the doors on the south side at the far end. That's what the hallway you see coming down there, and that'd be a future hall if this ever would become the intermediate school. The one you see to the north that runs horizontally across there would come out of the sort of the north edge of the cafeteria, right where the cafeteria and the kitchen come together, and run straight across. If that gym becomes an intermediate school gym, maybe renovating the lockers on the north side and allowing traffic to flow through there might work well, and the lockers that you have on the south side could be divided in half and turned into dressing space, but not necessarily full-blown locker rooms. And again, it begins to offer options, and what we want you to do is start thinking about where this might go so that you make responsible decisions now about what you're doing. Randy, can you please go to the last slide now? So the number, right there. So again, looking at what would be 85% of, I'm sorry, I did use 90. I read my own writing out there, instead of pulling it out of my head, I apologize. Using 90% participation at current occupant numbers, which would be just under 1,000 students between intermediate, junior, and senior high school, we'd be looking at about 5.2 to somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 meals, meaning what growth might be at all those grade levels, all the way up to 6.8. That's a big range, but there's a big difference in square footage. And the plan you saw was the biggest one. So anything that you would do to reduce the size of this cost-wise will also reduce it square footage-wise.
I can't quite see those numbers there. What was the total meals served on the two options, the high and low?
So 90% participation at the low end, or 100% participation at the high end. So 898 all the way up to 1,300. That's a difference of 400 meals basically a day.
Okay, can I interject? We would never serve 100% if somebody's sick. You know, I mean, honestly. I'm trying to be responsible, but I've never seen 100%. Somebody's not there, there's no trip, there's whatever. So, just throwing that out there.
I know it's very early. Mr. Self, could you back up a couple there and show that overhead view? Okay, Dana, if we need to add on classroom space to this building, how does that plan affect that? Is there still room to do that?
Yes. I mean, you've got, think about the size of this space.
Right?
You've still got that sort of space there. You've got a lot of space here. You've got corridors potentially. Potentially you could do both these things and fill in. So the world's wide open.
Could we still go down the north side of it right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board, any further questions?
No, I just say good work.
Yeah.
All that work.
Any comments from the audience?
Thank you, Dan.
Okay,
Thank you.
Dana, just keep in contact with Oscar, would you?
Do.
And we'll see you in August.
Thank you.
Be safe in your travels.
Thank you.
Mr. Darnell.
Okay, just a few updates I wanted to share with the board. First of all, opening days for school. Our staff comes back on August 9th, and we're going to start the day with a breakfast celebration. Welcome back to all of our staff members at 7:45 in the high school cafeteria. And Becky has, she's going to roll out the red carpet for the staff with the menu that's being served that day. And board, you're encouraged and you're welcome to attend that if your schedule permits that. 7:45. You'll get a letter in the mail too that will invite you to it, but I want to make sure that we said that publicly, that everyone's invited. We're looking for all of our staff to come in. We're going to all be together. We're going to celebrate the 21-22 school year, kick it off right so that everyone's on the same page as we get started. So we'll have a meeting in the auditorium, and then teachers and other staff will go back to the buildings. August 10th is a all staff meeting day with the principals in their buildings. The teachers are back with principals on that day, probably working in their rooms that day. And then the most important day of the year is August 11th. That's our first student day, and it's going to be ready, set, learn on that day. So that's what we're looking for on that day. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Couple other items, building fobs and keys. Part of, I think it was ESER 2, you had approved about $97,000 for building fobs. Had a chance to go through with Jack and Tony all of our buildings to look at the doors that were designated to have fobs installed on those doors. And then today I talked with principals about that, and principals are going to go back and verify our work and tell us to make sure that we are on the right page of what doors need fobs and what doors don't need fobs, so that we're all on the same page. The goal is to get those fobs in place so that everyone would have that fob and have access to the building through that fob. That way we track who's in the building, when they're in the building, what door is being utilized, and that type of thing. Once we get to that point, board, I'll be contacting our company that started this process. And at this point, we're not sure exactly how much work has been done. So we'll figure that out. But just so you know, that's in the works, it's coming. This is gonna be really good for all of our staff. The end goal is to get to the point where we don't have all these keys and we don't need all these keys. I mean, that's the purpose of the fob system, to kind of replace all the keys. Once people get into the building, then of course they're gonna need a key to get into individual classrooms and that type of thing. But to get into the building, I mean, it provides a secure entry for all of our staff through that fob. That way we can track it. New people come on, they're issued those fobs. People retire, people leave, that fob's deactivated. No fuss, no muss with it. So that's the plan of that. So I wanted you to be aware of that. There's been ongoing work with boilers in the restroom. Just so you know, I think we're waiting. Jack tells me, I get Jack and Jay confused. Still learning staff here. Jack says they're waiting on the vendor to come in and finish up the work to get the chemical storage where it needs to be. Once that happens this week, it's going to be good to go. That's taken care of, so I wanted you to be aware of that. Clearly by school start, it'll be resolved, but he's just kind of waiting for the vendor to come back at this point. So things are moving along. We are getting these buildings in great shape. Custodians and maintenance have done a wonderful job to get the buildings ready to go for school to start on August 11th. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. I can't remember who asked me to put CARES 3.0 on the agenda.
I think it was me.
Mr. Brubaker.
Well, originally, this started out as one thing and kind of morphed into something else. And after taking consideration where we're at with changing of our superintendent and business manager and some of the unknowns that have made their way onto this, I'd like to suggest to the board that maybe we just lay low on any sort of spending with CARES 3.0 unless the money's already spent or, you know, the check has already been written. I'm good. That's just what I'm throwing out.
Well, make a formal motion, I'll second it, and then we can discuss it.
I'll make a motion that we free spending on CARES 3.0 at this point. Or any of the CARES money for that matter. 1, 2, or 3 if it's not spent.
Then I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just so I understand, board.
Yeah.
We've got lots of POs out there, and if we have a PO and things are in the works of getting our reimbursement, we're moving forward with that. Is that everyone's understanding?
That's CARES 1, right?
1 and 2, and some 3. 2, we've got over $600,000 in staff. We need to submit a reimbursement to for the DOE on. We want our money back for that one.
Right.
If it's in the works,
Yeah.
I think we spend the money.
Yeah, don't cancel. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I asked the question, does that 2 and 3, does that impact you guys negatively?
There's 300-some thousand that have been allocated. That is POs ready to go out.
Okay, other than that though.
Other than that. Oh, yeah, there you go.
So that's.
I'm gonna pick up the microphone this time. Yeah, to answer your question, Mike, we do have things, for example, the Lit Library, the LLI library that, you know, works with fundamental reading instruction. We've priced that out. We have got what we need on that. That directly benefits students and really works to circumvent the learning loss that a lot of them experienced over, the last calendar year, and really is good for all students, both in my building and in John's building. We've got quotes on that ready to go, so that's something that I would really like to be able to move forward with, because that's going to be a direct benefit for our kids. And not that all of this won't, but that's something that we can start using as soon as we get it in, that our teachers have been chomping at the bit for, to get those materials in their hands. So even though that's in CARES 3, I would really like the opportunity to move forward with that purchase for our students and our teachers.
It's already been allocated.
Yeah, it's in the allocation
And
that's
that's fine,
already
like I say, I'm not promoting that we just pull the plug on everything. I was just saying, anything that has not been allocated, any PO that has not been written, the outstanding monies that we have not talked about spending yet, let's just hold. That's my point. I'm not in this to jack up anybody's plans or the students or the teachers. That's not my point. That's not what this money's about.
Amy, does it have any negative impact on MES at all, that you did that? Or could you just let us know if it does, and then?
No, I'm okay right now.
Cause I even wanna question like the allocation over 3 years, if that's the right thing. I mean, so these guys, when people come in and fill those positions, they've got to say it.
So when we say allocated, this list was actually an allocated list. This is what we approved to send in. So I think we need to be real careful here on how we define this. If you already wrote the PO, or if it's out, if the PO is ready to go, if it's allocated, then I'd be okay with it. What we're trying to do is say, we got a brand new superintendent coming, we got a brand new business manager coming, and there's some rules that need to be followed on CARES 3.0 as far as the stakeholders. I guess what I'm hearing is we're just pushing a pause button until the new folks are in place. And I got 3 administrators sitting here. If you're opposed to this, put your hand up. If not, we're good.
There's been some 300,000 have been approved by the state. You approved some staff hirings that were right here, like that's the reading expert. If you don't have the LLI materials that Tommy they're gonna be like, what am I supposed to do? So we want those have already been allocated. This is a small chunk of the 1.7, this is 300,000, and it is a huge benefit to our kids, huge. So those pieces, I think what we're talking about. We've got
Tony said the PO has not been cut for the
So
new computers.
you've got new staff computers that have already been okayed, and this is in 3.0.
The PO hasn't been cut
They
though,
haven't been
so
cut,
it's
but
not.
that is on its way, guys. Our staff is depending on it. So this is new staff computers. That's gonna go through. And then I know that Sue said something about the iReady subscriptions. That's important. But again, this is a smaller chunk of the change, not the big dollar spending. So yeah, just on that grace. We want to honor that.
And I seriously do reiterate again,
Yeah.
this is what we're here for. Tell us what you think. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't even make a motion to accept the computers. I'm just saying, let's just not blow all this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this and proceed carefully. We have some time to do this, and we have some new administration come in. That's my point.
Yeah, and I think we're good with that. We just, the things that are vital, critical aspects of our curriculum, that's for us like something that's a non-negotiable. The rest of this, we're good with, but we've got to have that stuff to go this year.
That's done as far as I'm concerned.
So can we define it instead of allocated or PO cut? Can we say if it's, Tommy, you just said
Essential.
Essential.
Essential instructional components, curricular components.
Well, that's why I asked the question last week, so why don't you get a list together of what those things are, and then we know what's going and what isn't. I mean, is that a difficult ask or no?
No.
What we can do, out of this 1.7 million, there's about 370,000 that's critical that we could move forward with. What's left over, we'll get you a list, we'll send you a list of what those items are. The rest of that, I totally agree, just wait for your new superintendent, wait for your new business manager. But in addition to that, I wanna make sure that we survey all of our staff and ask them point blank, what do you need? Not want, what do you need moving forward? This is once in a lifetime money, and make sure that you capture all of that input so that you really know, and your new superintendent and business manager would have that information too. But we'll get you a list of what's already there that we've gotta have, what principals are saying, those are the must-needs, we're planning on it for school to start.
Okay, I don't know that another list is the answer that we need. Does that, what'd you say, 370,000?
About 370.
Does that include the computers?
No.
Yeah, it's on that list, yeah.
I don't know, I just checked.
It is on the list?
Well, or take that list and
Well,
Randy, I
that's-
thought you did a great job that one night with Amy's just kind of highlighting it, put some highlight on the list, and if you don't want another list, I wanna know what's
Yeah.
being spent on, and what isn't being spent on, so.
I think,
So can you modify your motion to say no more than 400,000 for the immediate needs? Or if you modify your motion, we can approve that and they can bring the list for August. And everything else is froze? I mean, what do you think?
That works, that'll work. If you wanna amend your motion, that works for me.
Yeah, I will amend my motion to what Dave said, stop at 400,000. You might as well take the blame.
We'll just,
We've got it captured.
okay. We're not gonna spend any more of the CARES 2.0 or 3.0 monies more than 400,000.
Just three.
Just
three. We've gotta recapture those funds with the 2.0.
Say that.
Recapture the salary funds. Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
Right, well, he's gonna do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a reimbursement, that we've already spent that.
Right.
That don't have anything to do with this. What we're talking about is new spending. Correct?
That's just three. Yeah, all three, yeah.
Right. So, that's the motion. You still saying it that, Mike?
I'm sorry.
It's just CARES 3.0 because 2.0 is already
It's
gone on.
done.
I know I heard 2 someplace, but it's just the 3.0 new that is the 400,000. 2.0 is already. It's
Where are we
already
getting the 600,000 back? 2.0 or 3.0?
Two.
2.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
coming
our
in.
reimbursement.
That's reimbursement.
That's our
You
reimbursement.
already paid staff last year, we just need to get our money back.
Yes.
Okay. So we're saying we're not gonna spend any more than $400,000 with the POs that are out and the needs that they need for the start of school. And that's the motion. Do you still second that motion?
I'll say.
Okay. So, any further discussion?
I was, does it need to be a vote? Does it need to be a motion and,
Yeah,
okay.
Taking action.
yeah.
Is this going to include purchasing of new computers?
Yes.
No further discussion?
I just, the reason I asked that, if something else would have come up and then it has to wait for another vote, I just don't wanna restrict the admin team and the,
Well,
That's why I
and
asked the
again,
question
hopefully,
last week, Rick, to find out what.
hopefully by our September meeting, we'll have a new superintendent and a new business manager, and they can bring a recommendation to the board.
yeah, I'm very supportive of that, I'm just, yeah, feel like we're potentially hamstringing the admin a little bit, but hopefully not.
Okay. Any other comment? Okay, Mr. Raymer,
Reluctantly, yes.
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Rubraker,
Yes.
Mr. Espacet?
I'm gonna challenge you, Dave, can you restate the motion?
Sure.
Okay.
CARES 3.0, if the PO's already been written, or it's the immediate needs that the administrators just talked about, including the new computers, up to 400,000 can be spent. The rest of the CARES 3.0 is frozen until, spending freeze until the new superintendent and the new business manager can sit down with the admins and the people involved in the day-to-day operations and modify that list.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Hensley?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Anybody vote no? Okay, unanimously 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. First reading of a transfer policy.
Board, your policy committee, under leadership of Mike and Boyd, Mike, you wanna talk us through these?
Well, we're just the policy committee to review, so this transfer policy was put together with John and yeah, with the MTA. I mean, I just attended the meeting, so what happened here was we basically we floated out, looked at the points of contention, came to consensus on the path. Actually, I thought it was a really productive meeting, actually, so, I think this satisfies everybody's desires, correct? So,
Yes.
basically straight and to the point, so, yeah.
Board, has everybody had a chance to read the transfer policy? This is the first reading if you want to make any amendments.
And again, our process works that we want to get as close as possible on these policies, but I mean, usually the first read, that's a milestone, we get it the first read, and then everybody voices up. So, again, that's why we do a first read and a second read prior to approval, so, looking for input on this policy.
Any comment, questions, board?
I'm good with it.
MTA reps, principals? They all got their thumbs up. Okay, well, I guess we'll bring this back, August 17th. Hiring policy.
We're gonna post all of these on our website too, if you approve it tonight as first read, we'll post it on the policy, post all three of these on the website, so that they're out there, other folks can take a look at those too.
Since you're new, I would just let you know that typically these should have been, I know these were late today in correction, but typically those are supposed to be out on the website. Contracts, any of that kind of stuff is supposed to be out on the website when the packet comes out.
Okay.
We did that a couple years ago so that people had a chance to see it and come and comment, which I apologize, we didn't open it up to public comment before the start of the meeting, but we will at the end. So, hiring policy, first reading. Mr. Hensley or Mr.
So
Darnell?
similar, we've been, since I've been on the board, some of the conversations have centered around how we hire people and et cetera. And again, a policy's intent is number one, legally what to follow as far as equal employment, things like that. Number two, what's our procedure? How do we make sure, in this case, how do we always make sure we have the best person in that position? With the fair hiring process. So this is actually our first real policy on this section. Typically, in the industry, it's an HR function that takes care of this stuff. So this was put together with the cross-functional team, and then the transfer policy actually, since it's a different group of people, that's why we split them. It just makes sense that you've got different. So this covers classified and admin, and it, quite a few, we got quite a few additions from the first time we sent it around, so, but I think it, looking for comment on this as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the work, Mike, and I think it's a good document. Question on 5B, where it says interview committee members will not have personal or financial ties or relations with any of the candidates. Was there any, in a small community like that, I was just wondering if we should define what a personal,
Yeah, we may need, I thought about that because I added that, but that's basically to make sure that that you don't have people that are on hiring committees that, just to make it non-conflictive and fair.
No, and I appreciate
A
it.
husband shouldn't be on a hiring committee for a wife, a son, or, somebody working for somebody or whatever. That's really part of it, just a kind of a fair interview. So we can definitely tweak that or define it, but
kind of the 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon, you know. There's degrees of familiarity with people.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it's always good practice to try to separate that, but the fact that this is a very small community, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't have a relationship of some kind.
Well, and that's where Mark, you know, I imagine Mark's gonna wordsmith that and when he goes at it. Or we could strike the whole, you know, would there be a better way of phrasing that?
Right after.
I mean, we can, yeah, give it some thought, but there probably is a much better way.
Well, you could replace will with should.
Every committee should have first one financial.
Should not.
Oh.
Should not.
Yeah, I also like where you use the word encouraged. That gives a little, just the common sense part of what goes into this.
What are you talking about?
Well, just generally, if something's encouraged, that gives the people involved in the process a little freedom to make a decision whether it makes sense.
What about we put the interview committee members should not have any conflict of interest with the candidates? That's usually illegal.
There is a legal
I find a
definition
conflict
of
of
that.
interest for Heartland Career Center.
I like that.
On 2B, I would like to see that spelled out, up on top. It gives the administrators a lot of leeway and the superintendent a lot of leeway in hiring below administrative positions. But in 2B, I would like to see that clarified that those positions will be advertised internally and externally. That's where an administrative license is required for that job. I'm fine with the wording up above, but on this one right here, I think that needs to be spelled out.
You're on 2B, Dave?
Yeah, on 2B it says administrative positions or any other position except superintendent that requires an administrative license by Indiana code or board policy include the principal, teachers, 2 or more administrators, and up to 2 school board members. And it could include a classified staff member depending on the open position. When you go on up to the top, there's a lot of language about the freedom, I guess I would call it, on when the open position occurs and whether it needs to be filled, is it part-time, and then where they're gonna advertise it as far as posted.
So what's your point?
What I'm saying is I think an administrative position that requires an administrator's license needs to be posted the same way every time, internally and externally. And it doesn't really spell that out.
Well, I thought we covered it. 1B, internal posting only occur only prior to April 30th will follow transfer policy. Internal, external postings occur at all other times simultaneously, include a job description with posting. So I thought we decided to do, yeah. So you're talking admin now.
Right.
Yeah, it's classified admin, yeah.
Okay, so this part was discussed with at MTA discussion and with the policy committee. I don't remember which committee it was that you guys came from.
You got it.
And that was in regards to, at times there are positions that are part of teaching positions that might only be internal postings that are needed. And so we agreed to the April 30th. If it was, something that could be filled from within our district, that prior to April 30th, it would be posted just internally.
So like your summer school, your, I don't know, your things that you're not pulling in outside people to fill those positions because you're not bringing in a new position. And then anything else would be posted internally and externally, so people could apply for both. So if you have an admin position, it's automatically gonna go to number 2. It would skip
Okay,
number 1.
all right.
So like your number 1 is for like those positions that are, like somebody's retired and they let you know in January or December or
Just like
something.
what Tommy just experienced in his building. Yeah, I was fine with that. I was just looking to put it in there for the administrator, but if that's the way this is, I'm good with it.
So like you only have that 1 for those types of things, or like you have a team leader, department chair, something along those lines where you're not gonna pull in somebody from outside just to fill those type of positions.
Would it make you feel better if maybe on number 1 rather than, because I wouldn't read number 1 like that, even though it makes sense. Could we add excluding admin?
Well, the only reason I said down there was 2 is because that's where it talks about, at 2B, it talks about administrative positions or any other position that requires an administrative license. I was just gonna add the sentence that needs to be posted internally and externally.
Right, but like 2B is talking about the interview committee.
Right, but right, well, that's where the description is about who's on that committee.
Right.
Or you could add it, make a 2A and just say, use the same description as 2B, administrative positions and any other position except superintendent will require internal and external posting. Just make it, put it in B.
Put it in B what?
Well, you got 1, open position is posted, and then it says the type of posting is determined, you just add a 2A or put a 3 in there under internal and external posting, just administrative, if it requires an administrative license, it will be posted internally and externally.
So you want to state it twice?
Wouldn't
Under 2?
It doesn't say it anywhere.
I know.
Dave's he's on number 1, like subset 2.
Right.
So what's up here on the screen, we need to actually move back up.
Right
Dave's
there.
here.
You could put it under 2 right there, just say administrative license required will be posted internal and external.
And that 1 comment, who put that back in there, should the superintendent determine an internal, what is that there?
Says, should the superintendent determine the internal candidate is the best fit?
Yeah, that goes away.
Okay.
So further available, the hiring procedure concludes with a transfer recommendation to the school board.
Couldn't we just simply put excludes admin up at the top on one?
So hold on a minute.
One.
What's your point of differentiation? So this covers admin and classified staff.
Anything
So
that
it says
requires
that
an
it's internal posting only to April 30th, and then it follows the transfer policy. Then it says internal and external postings, that includes classified and admin, occur at all other times simultaneously and include a job description.
Where does it say admin?
It doesn't say admin, this policy covers admin and classified. So I'm a little confused why you guys want to state it twice there. Or you want to differentiate that it's.
Are you going to treat admin different than classified?
Yes, it requires an administrative license.
So basically what you're doing is you're removing the requirement for an external posting for classified staff.
If it's before April 30th.
I'm trying to make sure that if that administrative license is required for that job, that it has to be internally and externally.
Okay, we'll put a 3, yeah, but we'll just, we can do that.
I think it's what it already says, but maybe not very clearly, apparently not very clearly.
Apparently.
It's pretty much an overarching statement, guys. It says, if it's an internal posting, before the 30th, it'll use the transfer policy. Anybody else, we're gonna do external and internal postings. But I'll put it in there, you know?
But it doesn't say
I'm just
anybody
trying to
else.
understand.
What's the date part for? Can somebody explain that?
Yeah, I can explain that. At different times of the year, there is a crunch on available hires. The talent pool is more robust kind of in the month of May and early June. So April 30th, we felt as administrators that gave us ample time to allow the process to be open for our internal applicants and internal candidates that may be seeking a position. But when the month of May comes, we're getting our recent college graduates that are entering the hiring pool. People that are looking to maybe leave other districts are entering the hiring pool. But if we wait now, like, you know, where we're at here in the end of July, you know, there's tumbleweeds rolling through the available teaching ranks. So if we had to, in the entirety of this process, post something internally, wait, and then post it externally, we would potentially miss out on quality available candidates.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Just one, I have one more, reference checks, so we're on C, D, we're on 5D. So I understand, I would just like confirmation from legal on how to proceed and check references that a candidate does not list. I think we're asking for, it says 3 reference checks from previous supervisors are encouraged. And
Yeah, this was put together, I mean, I didn't put this together, but that was on there where it was encouraged to check people outside the resume, in other words, dig a little deeper.
yeah, I think just confirmation that that's permissible and the process, how to proceed with that, to give our hiring committee some guidance and protect them a little bit.
If you have those candidates sign that application that allows that, then you have that flexibility and you're covered. So I'll double check on our applications to make sure that language is there.
Thank you.
I think it is, but I'll double check it.
Did Mark review that?
I sent it to him, I don't, he didn't get back to me, he was leaving on vacation.
Yeah, I don't even know if you knew we
Like-
did that, Rick.
Our
And this is a-
applications say that you can contact any of the prior employers. So like even if you didn't list somebody from your prior employer under the reference section, you can call any of them. I mean, and talk to them.
We'll double check to make sure that language is on the application. And that gives you the flexibility of doing that, so, and you're saying it is? So, okay.
Yes, it is in there because we've done it.
Okay, we'll make sure.
There's a voice on it.
Is there any other comments on the hiring policy? This is the first reading, there'll be no vote. We've got some modifications to make, we'll bring it back August 17th.
Nice job, guys.
Yeah, good job.
Okay.
Nice job,
Well,
everybody.
that's your.
Nice job, everybody.
Okay. Electronic participation by board members in board meetings. This is a first reading. This is required since the governor ended his resolution or his mandate, proclamation, I guess you call it. So, Mr. Hensley?
Hold on. Lost my
what you're,
So this one's this is mandated to come up with this, so what we, through some polling of the board, et cetera, what we decided to allow electronic, that there's some legal caveats I didn't know about that Mark said, so that's. So there's a few things in here, but one of the things is what's the limitation? So we kind of talked about this a little bit, where we're at least gonna have, no more than 3/7 of the board can be electronic, that way we have a physical forum. Again, there was this was the suggestion from my SBA and legal basically, but something about notification, so they had it in days, and so I changed that from days to like 4 hours prior to meeting, because there's times when I'm on the road, that I don't know if I want to make it home or not, and then I know other people are like that as well, so I didn't know how that would end, what you think you need, Randy, is that a big deal to set up a link if somebody, would 4 hours be enough for you? I know I've called you probably within an hour, but
Yeah, depending on at what point we reconfigure this room, and back to what it used to be, we'll probably have Zoom capabilities. We'll have those. It's just the setup takes a little while.
Yeah, just written.
See, that should be out of there. I took that out of there. We're usually giving him a phone call, so I don't know what this is that you printed, but is that the one I sent in today? Is it in there?
I believe so, yes.
Written notice?
You want to just say notice?
Yeah, take out the written.
Okay.
Before we get too far along here, in that first one, it says subject to the provisions of the policy. On number 2, it says other than an executive session allows the public to simultaneously attend. Somewhere in here we need to put that you can't electronically participate in an executive session.
you can or cannot?
Yeah, I think it's on down here, I think. For that guy. Yeah, it's. Military, that's why. So here, let's go down through this, just note that. So then, the 3/7 may not participate in more than 50% of school board meetings in a calendar year by electronic means. And again, this is assuming COVID doesn't come back, right? So this isn't a COVID policy.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah. So, again, that mandates that, or military service, illness, death of relative, emergency involving threat or whatever. So that's legal, that's the kind of legal jargon there. And then they had this in there, this probably is something we need to talk about. The member may attend 2 consecutive school board meetings by electronic and must attend at least 1 school board meeting in person between the 2 sets of consecutive meetings. So I don't know, that's Mark, that was one of the notes that he put in there. So to me that sounds a little weird.
The notes that Mark put in there, this policy cannot be lighter or less restrictive than what the state said. That's why he put that in there. That's part of the state statute. Yes, I sent it to him and that was his response.
So then it says, no board member may participate by means of electronic communication in a school board meeting at which the board will take final action to the budget, make a reduction in personnel, initiate a referendum, impose increase in fare, exercise board power and eminent domain, or establish, raise, or renew a tax. So on there, I guess number 7 would be, we could put that there. Other than executive session, yeah, number 2, other than executive session, allow the public to silently attend. Yeah, that's for the public. So number 7 will probably be an executive session if we don't read it down here a little bit.
Comment on that, I certainly understand not voting on those things, but to not even participate in the meeting at all seems
I think that what it says, you can participate in the meeting, you just can't vote on that stuff.
And that's what the clarification would be, because I'm fine with not voting on those things. I would, yes, but if you happen to be increasing a fee, that shouldn't preclude you from being in the meeting at all, is my point.
Yeah,
That's just
and that probably
So
needs to
we'll run
be
that through
tweaked
Mark
too.
and refine that list to what it needs, basically what it needs to be. I have no idea, to be honest with you, so I'll let it in there.
I would add that if the governor, I mean, this is, since that proclamation went away, if COVID, heaven forbid, we have another uptick and he issues that, then you would probably be able to do an executive session by electronic means. But
Top sentence, top paragraph. This policy does not apply when the school corporation is subject to a declared local or state public emergency.
right.
And then voting, basically electronic, you know, we decided we can vote if we can be seen and heard without interruption, present for the entire session.
I kind of chuckle at that, because that, I mean, if you read that to the letter of the law, that, I don't know if we've had a Zoom without somebody having some issues, so.
Well, and this, again, this is coming from IFBA legal, you know, I didn't write that paragraph, you know.
No,
But again, looking at the intent, so people aren't jumping in and out of meetings and having conversations with other people while the meeting's going on, and just the intent of the interruption, so we can change, I mean, we can change that.
I'm not saying you do it, but if we impose it, then it's defined as any interruption.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a major interruption would be a better.
Yeah, then you have to define that.
Yeah,
But
I know,
it's
but
just,
I mean, it's-
yeah.
Or we can take the whole paragraph out, but I think you should, I mean, you ought to know what you're voting on, right? I mean, regardless, and if you're not part of the discussion and you're not able to visibly see what the discussion point is, then, like, you know.
Or say for instance, you dropped out, you were traveling, whatever, and you missed 10 minutes of the meeting, then you zoom back in, then we gotta stop and explain what you missed. So I think the intent there was, is if you're here at the Pledge of Allegiance and you're through the meeting, you know, it'd be no different than somebody having an emergency and leaving. At that point, you just notate the time that they left.
Yeah,
It
that
says
would
that
be-
you're counted as here.
Well, I think I talked to someone about that, I mean, let's say someone's on at the beginning, we're going along, we're taking votes, and then they lose their connection. I mean, do you go back and remove their votes?
No, they were here, they voted, their vote counts.
Well, but it says for the whole meeting, it doesn't say until they lost connection.
I don't know, I guess that one's one for Mr. France.
Well, and the reason it's the entire session, is you don't want, I would particularly wouldn't think somebody would be hopping on, if you can hop on for a part of the meeting to vote on something, I think your vote would be right. You know, you'd be right here in the whole meeting is my desire of what you do. So, I mean, that's where.
Right,
that's where
I'm
that's
just
coming
saying
from.
the way, I mean, that could be read is, yeah, just that if you.
I don't think there's any way you could ever go back and erase somebody's vote. I mean, if they're here and whether they're in the room or they're online, they voted, but if, you know, it's no different than if I get a phone call and get up and leave, you just note in the minutes I left at this time. It would be the same way if you lost your electronic connection.
There's probably a better
way to word it.
Yeah, I think you just gotta tweak that little last part of that sentence.
Well, you got to give that some thought and then throw some suggestions that way.
I was gonna say, can we agree that this needs a little bit?
Yeah, I think the intent is right, and I assume we all pretty well agree with the intent, it's just not entirely clear to me.
So then the second point under voting, all votes taken, you know, doing the roll call, especially your own system. And then minutes, I don't know, I just put this like virtual status or whatever, we gotta have some type of status to call people that are electronic. So we'd have present, virtual, and absent. And then we have to record that by state law. Every meeting, what everyone is. And
question, Mike,
Yeah.
before you were there as well. What portion of this was taken from the ISBA? Was it, did you say it was recommended?
The majority.
Majority was,
Okay, yeah, we just haven't, you know, like, decide the number. So we talked about it, it's a little bit weird. The other, like, the 3/7 kind of made, we've always had that quorum rule, right? Physical quorum, 4 out of 7. And then, yeah, the rest, you know, some of the stuff, like the 50%, that's there. Okay, so again, I imagine Mark's gonna have some comments on this, what is legally mandated, what isn't, and we'll revise it.
Okay. I got his response here, just real briefly. The electronic meetings policy must not be less restrictive than what the Indiana code requires. The policy currently does not have all the restrictions that I think are necessary under the code. Specifically, it does not limit electronic participation to 50% of yearly meetings, does not restrict consecutive meetings, does not state the prohibitions on certain voting items, and this is from the state, adopting a budget, reduction in personnel, referendums, fees, and etc. These items need to be part of the policy. I'm going to forward these thoughts to Mike and Boyd just so they're aware of them, and then when he comes back from vacation, you guys can sit down and hammer it out in the second reading. Everybody good with that? Okay. Public comments?
Good evening. My name is Chris Metzger. It's been a while since I've been here. Thanks for the opportunity. Tonight I just think I need to start with my bias. I need you to know that I'm a Bible-believing Christian, and I believe that Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and was raised again on the third day, so that grace can be extended to anybody who wants to choose to believe. With that being said, I've done a lot of research. COVID, gives us opportunity to be home and start diving into things. So I started researching the public education system, understanding that compulsory education became, well, it just started, I guess, back in the 1800s because people were wanting their kids to know how to read so they could read their Bibles. By the time 1918 came, there was state law in every state for compulsory education. When that happened, entered John Dewey, who, through history, we hear that he was the great educator, but he actually looked at the education system as the prime component for social engineering. So that takes me to where we are today. I think he'd probably be happy with where things stand today in public education. As you enter into your decisions, as far as curriculum goes, I know you've hired people to address social emotional learning. That is a perfect tool for social engineering at this point. I do not know how much any of you on the board are really familiar with the beginnings of social emotional learning, but it has its base in Marxist ideology, and you need to be aware of that as you move forward because it's being pursued hot and heavy by the school system. Through social emotional learning, there is the potential for usurping parental rights. There is potential for causing children of faith to stumble because you are introducing them to ideology that you're saying you can't just tolerate at this point, that you have to accept and be a part of it by making them comply with things they may not believe in. It's something to consider moving forward. I know that Castle, the company that promotes social emotional learning, has tons of networking programs that can be purchased, whatever. It takes thousands and thousands of dollars for quote-unquote training, and in order to reach tiers and levels within social emotional, the whole complex, in my opinion, it's like a pyramid scheme to me as I research and go through it. So I think you need to really dive into the beginnings of it, what it actually is, because they package it pretty. They make it sound as though you're just teaching your kids to be kind, but it's much deeper than that. I have contacts with people who would be more than willing to put on a workshop to help you in understanding this topic outside of people who are necessarily within the school system and its influences, as far as the teachers union, the state school board association, the American School Counselor Association. They are all going to come to you with their perspective, but there is another side to it that I don't think is being discussed. I have someone helping me put together a packet of information that when I get it all together, I'll be happy to share with you. But when you come from a worldview perspective, as I have, there is a lot within social emotional learning that can start stepping on toes as far as faith goes. But also know that because it's grounded in Marxist ideology, you also are complicit in moving forward with that, with an internal destruction of this country. And I just find it necessary that you be informed on both sides of it. When I gather more information as far as organized and pretty to hand to you, I'll be happy to share that with you. But I know you're going to be looking at spending thousands and thousands of dollars for training for staff. And I get that staff has to have personal development training, I get it. But I think you really need, at a time where you're looking at money, you really need to consider all of that moving forward. So just as a person of faith wants to be comfortable in your classrooms, I understand it's a place for everybody. But when you start pulling all of the ideology in, I mean, personally, I don't even want to see yoga in public school because it's Hinduism. And we can't outwardly bring Christian faith into it, so I have an issue personally with yoga. Not everybody does, and I understand not everybody comes from my worldview. But I just want you to take those things into consideration moving forward, especially as you're going to look to spend thousands of dollars to make that happen. So I guess I'll leave it at that, just give you something to think about. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you. Hold on just a second. Board, any response, comment?
Well, any programs or curriculum that we bring in this board are going to be highly evaluated, and that's why, that money that was allocated for professional development, that's part of this freeze is that, we don't even know what that is.
Right.
So no one's been presented anything. We're not institutionalizing anything within the school. I mean, it's not.
But you've hired an individual to pursue that, to make it cohesive from pre-K? You have not done that?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Originally on the list, it said counselor, social, emotional,
Right.
director. That piece of that portion was dropped.
Okay. No,
And
not
we
familiar.
hired a 7th and 8th grade counselor.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw the last meeting.
I did
our
not. I haven't had a
curriculum
chance to see that one.
Okay, curriculum director was
Okay.
here. There's some discrepancy in the amount of money. Some of it's a curriculum, some of it's professional development. It's all been put on hold.
Okay.
We've hired no one to be a social, emotional learning coordinator, director. That's, you heard it tonight, that's all on hold.
Okay.
Yeah, hey
Mr.
Dave,
Darnell?
Correct, that is correct.
I'd like to make a comment. I know a couple meetings ago, I sat here and kind of beat a drum for SEL. And at that point, that was before I was maybe informed of what SEL truly was. At that point, I believe most of us as a board were thinking it was social emotional learning. And we all agree that our kids need all the help they can get in today's day and age, and all walks of life and everything. So I sat here and asked that this needs to happen. Well, since then, some eyes have been opened, some opinions have changed, and we have not hired anyone, and I don't believe we're going to go down that road.
Well, I just think it's important to understand with social emotional learning, it's not necessarily a curriculum for like teaching in a class. It is a cultural change that influences every aspect of every subject taught. It's not just, here, let's come and teach us a little piece. it envelops everything within the whole school curriculum. So I just want to put it out there for something to think about. And
Well, now the school board, we do balance with a lot of different shared beliefs and ideologies, and it is a public school, you know, when it comes down to it, but we are gonna address, you know, if you wanna use the label social emotional learning, you know, is that, what, you know, how you're defining it. I think first you gotta look at the definition. I'm a believer in working with kids on how, you know, how they interact and stuff like that. I'm also a believer that we, you know, I'm still gonna push the mental health therapists in the school. You know, people, if you think that, you know, I remember being a kid in the school. I've had kids go through this school. I've had kids go through other schools, and if you don't think there's a need for that, you know, you need to open your eyes and wait. And I'm not talking specifically.
no, I understand. I understand what you're saying, and I know a whole big part of the component with social emotional learning is this mental health push. But there's some boundaries being pushed within that. I totally understand if there are students that are in need of help. I get it. Talk to their parents, get them the help they need. But when you approach every student with a trauma-based teaching mindset, you're already setting up children to come into with the thought process of being oppressed that shouldn't even be put in that category. There are children that aren't going to need the mental health help, but social emotional learning pulls everybody into the same pool, and then it goes from there. And then you talk about data, the data mining that can happen within that process, and it's a big beast. I just want to put it out there so that you're aware, and when I get more information compiled, I'll be happy to forward it and share that with you too.
I would like to just reassure everyone watching and everyone that's here. I believe the policy number is 1364. I could have that wrong. But there's also the Hatch Amendment, which is federal law. No curriculum's gonna be approved until the board gets a presentation on it. It has to be board approved. And every single parent has the right under the Hatch Amendment and our policy to see and hear the curriculum that's being taught. And I wanna make that real clear to everybody.
Right,
So,
all the more reason for people to be aware and speak when they need
it's
to
on
speak.
both of them are on our website.
Right. There's times I come at this, I'm like, I'm just a grandparent. I don't have a bone in this anymore. But when you think of it as a taxpayer perspective, and then you think about these kids are going to be growing up being leaders in this country, the responsibility we all bear for that, and where do we want this to go, and what do we want this country to look like at some point? We all are responsible in that. So that's the reason I'm here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board? Any other public comment? Board comments?
I have to say that just, you know, diving in the policy committee with the admin and the teachers association, that was a good experience. I loved it, you know, we gotta keep that relationship where it is, right? Because that's the strength of this school, you guys with the kids. And you know, as we approach the opening of the school year, it's like the mask, you know, Brian, you're right, you know, I'm looking at that, you know, as a potential impact on our enrollment, but I like the word you used, Steve, is fluid. I mean, we gotta kind of stay on our toes. Same way with social emotional learning, and I mean, I think the thing is to define these things, share and be visible and transparent with people. It's kind of like the term, you know, with Dick, you know, on the strategic plan. I've got a lot better feeling on that now that those folks have had true input, and we've got, you know, things at the school. I mean, we still have things to work on that, but you know, we've got a lot of good things going here. You guys are doing a great job. I mean, the STEM all the way through the schools, the dual language, the, you know, pre-K. I mean, that's, a lot of people don't think about the education process, but the first step is recruitment. And that's what we all need. You know, the stronger we are, the better that recruitment's gonna be. And then, you know, the enrollment thing, you know, we're gonna have to deal with it. You know, hopefully we at least get the kids back, you know, some of them that we lost. You know.
I just echo on that to the people on the high school core committee. Some of the meetings that we've had with the F&F have been some of the most rewarding and enjoyable meetings that we've had. You know, this teamwork going together is really, really, refreshing. And, you know, we got a couple more teams to work with, but we'll get there.
Say good luck with the start of the school year for everybody. Got this, a little different than start of last year, so I'm looking forward to starting that up again. And thank you, Steve, for all your work so far today.
And just a reminder to everybody, we moved, because of the start of school, we moved the board meeting for August to the 17th to give the staff a little bit of a break, trying to get ready for a board meeting and this opening of school. So we will be the third Tuesday, and then there's a work session on the fourth Tuesday. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Booker? Mr. Brubaker? All in favor?